The busy life of Dubai is full of discrimination against immigrants from South and Southeast Asia who work in the service industry for the wealthy.
Filipinos and Indians are mostly the targets of discrimination, since most poor immigrants who come from Asia work as maids as well as doing other types of jobs in the service industry.
In Dubai, a lot of the immigrant discrimination that goes on is pretty subtle. Instead of big riots and violence in the streets, much of the racism against Filipinos is silent. There are usually cruel signs on restaurants that tell Asians to keep out, and ignorance from taxi drivers who'd rather drive Europeans than Filipinos. Many civilians respect Europeans and Americans a lot more than Asians, Filipinos in particular. We were looking to upgrade our studio flat to a one-bedroom unit. On at least 2 occasions, the watchman told us bluntly we were not welcome to their building. Ray, 34, civil engineer. Not only is this racism just a few things that happen day to day, but there have also been several rumors about Filipinos in the media, making other Arabians believe that they are not meant to be in their country. One of these rumors is that Filipinos are prone to overcrowding. This has come from the fact that most Filipinos don't have enough money to rent out an apartment all on their own, and so many families live together in small spaces. This has led to complaints from other guests of apartments of too much noise and bad odor. This is why the media has spread a rumor about how Filipinos always overcrowd apartments. This has caused apartment building owners to ask for more money from Filipinos if they're going to rent out an apartment. Bagharan, an Indian watchman in Karama, Dubai, said a 2-bedroom unit in his building is rented out for roughly $16,500. But for Filipinos, the same unit goes for almost $22,000. Much of the awful discrimination against immigrants in Dubai is focused against women. The cause of this is their vulnerability to exploitation and abuse. Most of all the Filipino maids who work in Dubai are female. Many employers of poor Filipino women treat their maids very cruelly. Female Filipino maids can't do much when their employers abuses them, and this is the reason why so many incidents happen each year. Women get beaten, raped, restricted of their passports, and may even be killed if they try to escape from their employers. Filipino maids aren't the only ones who get discriminated, though. Many immigrant Indians are also in the spotlight. The biggest issue that female Indian workers face seems to be salary discrimination. Whenever Arabians hire Indian workers, they pay them a very low amount of money, which they can't do much about. An Indian woman who worked in a small office job was paid $3,000 less a month than her European co-worker doing the exact same job. Also, an Arabian woman was paid $3,500 a month for being an assistant to some owner. Then, when an Indian woman replaced her, her starting salary was $1,600. The salary discrimination is quite a big issue, but since this happens in private corporations, the government doesn't do anything about it.
In the past, nothing was different, it was worse. There were rules and regulation that discriminated immigrants. Also, there was violence and hatred in the USA.
Italians were not accepted by the native-born Americans. They were easy targets for being objects of prejudice and contempt. They were seen as unlettered, unskilled ghettos who would ruin the purity of America. They were discriminated because of their skin colors. Italians were seen as non-Anglo or non-white in the United States of America. As a very famous incident, 2 Italian anarchists, Fernandino Nicola Sacco and Bartolomeo Vanzetti, were trialed and executed in 1927 in what is a prime example of anti-Italianism. Due to the radical political views of these 2 Italian immigrants, they were put to death for a crime neither committed, despite alibis, evidence, and even international public support. The trial is still studied today as a case studied in civil liberties, and it is fairly obvious anti-Italian feelings were rampant among both the jury and the judge. Slavs were just like the Italians, were seen as unskilled, uneducated, and transient. Slavs in this case, Poles and Slavs were seen as bigger threats to the U.S. institution than any other ethnic group.
When the Irish immigrated to America, they were discriminated against because of their accents and actions. The Irish people were often given the lowest paying jobs. These jobs required the most work with very little pay. The Irish were also discriminated against because of their cultural and religious differences.
The Chinese did not come into America through Ellis Island, but they mostly came through the West Coast. Just like the other groups of immigrants coming into the USA, they were also harshly discriminated against. The Chinese were looked upon as outsiders because of their skin color and facial features. In 1882, the Congress passed a law called the Chinese Exclusion Act that would regulate the immigrants from China, which suspended the immigration of Chinese laborers for a period of 10 years. The act required every Chinese to carry a certificate that identifies his or her status.
There has always been a lot of discrimination against blacks, but the high peak of racism against them was during the Industrial Revolution. The citizens of America did not welcome any blacks into their political matters. The economics and social freedom was not suspended. They were seen as uneducated, unskilled, and a definite threat to job securities. Blacks were also paid less than most immigrants. Blacks were hated by the clans, as well as Jews and Catholics. Blacks were to be considered the wretched of the earth, as well as the Italians and Slavs. Blacks were paid less than whites who worked the same job. Blacks were always the last ones to be hired. Black people were viewed by the media and society as unskilled workers that were a threat to the society.
Discrimination against immigrants back in the Industrial Revolution is more or less the same as discrimination now, mainly against Filipinos in the UAE, as I mentioned earlier. You might be wondering, if they get treated so badly, why don't they go to court? The problem is most maids actually don't want to take any court actions, since this is sometimes hard to do and can result in multiple unwanted outcomes. First of all, it is usually difficult to prove physical and sexual abuse in court, not even mentioning that the judges might be supporting the Arab employer rather than the Filipino maid. Women may also refrain from taking court action because they are unaware of their rights or do not have any access to legal aid at all. Most of all, female maids stay away from court because they are afraid of more abuse from their employer and being deported. If the court does not acknowledge a woman's pleadings, then the employer will most probably beat them afterwards. Also, the women who came from the Philippines or India came because they have more opportunities in the UAE than in their home country. This is why being deported may ruin female immigrants' lives.
As you can see, there has always been discrimination against immigrants for time.
What we can hope for in the future is that the wealthy employers of the maids of Dubai will be more respectful to their workers.
If they can try to feel empathy for them, maybe they won't treat them so badly. They are the ones who can change their own thinking and do something for the better.